Are you having trouble starting your novel? Or worse, you've already started it and you're worried that it sucks? Well, believe me, I've been there. I've written some bad books and some good books, but the point is that I've written plenty of books in my career as a writer and an author, so I definitely know what it's like to have the beginning of your novel jitters. And so I think this happens for a number of reasons, but today's video is basically about how to get over those first chapter or beginning jitters and actually start writing your novel. So let's get straight into it. I'm Kendall and this is Plot to Print, and here's 3 tips on how to start your novel and sort of get over that first initial impression that it has to be perfect or that you have to know exactly what you're doing. I'd say tip 1 is start in the action. And so I think a lot of people, when they first start writing their novel, they want to sort of do some world building and, introduce their character a little bit. And I think that this may be sort of something that a lot of people run into, where they may start by introducing their character's everyday routine. And this isn't a fault of anybody starting out, whether you're, a novice or anything else. This is something that we've probably seen in a lot of books before. We get introduced to a character and their world before they go on, their character journey that is going to make up the novel. And so we start out kind of wanting to describe their routine, their average day. But I think that's really where we can sort of make our first mistakes when we're setting out to begin our first chapter. We begin by introducing our character. Maybe she wakes up in bed and rolls over and turns off the alarm clock and gets up and takes a shower, and then maybe we'll try to be creative with our, introducing our descriptions, and so we'll have her go to the mirror and brush her long brown hair. And so yes, there is action in that, but at the same time, unless that routine is really going to come into play where that mirror is going to turn into a portal to time travel or something, there's always things that we can kind of leave out with these mundane things that we're using to set up our character's world, but at the same time don't move the story along. So what we really want to concentrate when we're starting a novel is, yes, we want to get to know our character, we want to get to know the world we're in, but we also want to make sure that we're starting with action. And so anything that we're doing, make sure it's going to move the story along in some way. So like I kind of said about the mirror, maybe she looks in the mirror every day, but on this one particular morning, she's going to notice something different about her reflection. She's going to notice something different about, maybe the background behind her, something like that. So you can definitely take these opportunities to introduce your character and your world, but also make sure you're including things for a reason. And always ask yourself, what is it that my character wants in a novel? Because ultimately your novel is always going to be about a character's transformation in some way. And so always kind of keep that question in the back of your mind. Even if your character doesn't know what they want, you just know as the writer that they need to change. If they don't change, they're going to be stuck in their old ways and, they'll never grow as a person. So really sometimes can be genre dependent. For horror, sometimes, our characters are put into a situation that's uncomfortable that they don't want to be in. And this is also for other genres as well, even fantasy. You're going to have a call to action in a lot of ways. If we think about, the Lord of the Rings and starting out in the Shire and then being called to action to take that journey to dispose of the ring into Mordor and stuff like that. So definitely some things to keep in mind is make sure that you are starting with action. Make sure you're kind of writing your novel like a movie or a play. You'll notice that because those things that happen on screen or on a stage, they're working with a limited amount of time. And so they don't really have a lot of time for other things, for inner thought and inner dialogue and certain things like that we might kind of attune or say or build up. They don't really have a lot of time for that. So kind of think about your book that way too, and think of it where your audience has the shortest attention span in the world, because they pretty much do, especially nowadays. You'd be lucky to have your book in front of readers who can actually pay attention to it and stay tuned reined in with it. But also everybody, including myself, deals with other things that want their attention nowadays. So the more you can grab their attention and keep their attention with action that matters and moves the story along, the better. My next tip would be to put your explorer hat on. And so this might go for my hardcore plotters who start out writing a novel with a whole grid of plots in front of them, or maybe you use index cards, and these are things that I've done too. I know I said I'm kind of in between pantsing and plotting, and I definitely am, so I sort of know the strengths and weaknesses that go into each style, and maybe that's why I fall somewhere in the middle. But when we remember to put our explorer hat on, we also give ourselves permission to deviate away from the outline we've written, or the index cards, or any kind of plotting that we've already done. A lot of people really like to follow their outline stringently. They've spent a lot of time on it, obviously. But I think also the journey of writing a book is sort of one of discovery. It's one of self-discovery for yourself as a writer. It's one where you're discovering your story and your character. You may know exactly what you want to happen. Earlier we talked about Lord of the Rings and maybe your character is going to throw a piece of jewelry into the fire, or you're going to have two characters who are meant to be and they're going to fall in love, or maybe your character is going to transform into a bat. You may know how you want your story to end, but you don't necessarily always need to know how they're going to get there. I think what we need to remember is that our outlines or our initial ideas for our novel, no matter how far they got, they're not set in stone. And so when you put your explorer hat on, you really just kind of free yourself up to do some exploration. Maybe there's things that are going to come up as you write that at the time that you were plotting, you hadn't thought of, or maybe things have happened in your life since you did that plot that are going to give you inspiration. Maybe there's a news story that you want to use or can gain insight from, anything like that. So I think it's really important to kind of stay loose as you're writing your novel. Any kind of plotting that you've done, your outline can be a great map for you, but at the same time, feel free to take some offshoots to that trail a little bit. You never know what you may find, and it's okay to kind of be a little messy too. You may find that you wanted to explore something initially, and then you go back and look at it and you go, oh, it doesn't really work for the story. And that's the great thing about starting out your novel, is because whenever you start out your novel, you're starting out your rough draft, your first draft. And so this is especially the place where you can be a little bit messy and not so refined, and give yourself permission to explore. So kind of go into it with the spirit of an explorer. You may know that you want to get to the hidden temple that's somewhere in the north of the jungle, but you don't know exactly how you're going to get there, and that's okay, because along the journey you're probably going to figure out how. Or that's kind of the fun of writing a book or a story or whatever creative project that you're working on, is the actual journey of it. I know a lot of times as writers we're so focused on the end result, but really if we focus so much on the end result, and to some degree publication for a lot of us, it sort of zaps the joy out of the writing process, which is something that I think is super important, is keeping that joy alive while you're writing. Because writing a novel, yes, you can do it in a short amount of time, but usually it takes some amount of time. It can take months, it can take years, and so you kind of want to make sure that you're engaged and you're having fun while you're doing it. And my final tip is to remember that less is more. And this is something that I sort of see a lot with modern novels, but also novels have done this a lot. And they sort of want to introduce a lot of characters at one time. It may be in the first chapter or the first couple chapters, but it tends to be a lot for your reader to keep track of. You may have a main character in mind, but maybe they have a group of friends, or they have a group of other people who they go to school with, or who are trapped in the maze with them, or going to the resort with them. And so I think because we see, maybe some TV shows do this, where they have an ensemble cast And it's not to say that you can't do this in a novel, but you sort of need to be aware that your reader is just starting out. They're starting out with your supposed main character, and that's sort of enough at the beginning. You want to make sure that you're laying out your side characters and your other characters and the other players in your novel in a way that's graceful and gives them purpose, and is not just like introducing them to introduce them. It can be a lot of names to keep track of. It can be a lot of relationships to keep track of, especially if you kind of try to force it into the first chapter. And I just think that if you kind of focus on your main character at first, building up their world and their story, your reader will be more attuned to then come into contact with the other players in their world. And so that less is more statement also works with backstory as well. In another video, we talked about how not to info dump, and I think a lot of writers tend to want to include a lot of backstory, especially at the beginning of their novels. And in that video, we sort of talked about how to do that in a creative way without just basically dumping it on the reader. And so you'll kind of want to lay out that backstory in ways that are pertinent to the story, that include action in the story. And it's not just paragraph after paragraph of things you think the reader should know. So it definitely comes into play. It's less and more with introducing characters all at one time, and also introducing backstory or lore or any kind of, magic systems or motivations, anything you want the reader to know. I know initially when we first started writing a novel, we're very excited about plots, and things that we've spent a long time dreaming up, but we sort of need to hold our horses on that and know when to introduce those certain things into a story. So just kind of hold your cards a little bit. You don't have to play your hand all at once, but you'll definitely get there. You'll know when the time is right, but even if you're really excited about certain aspects or introducing certain characters, try to just do it slowly so that your reader who's just starting your book can sort of slowly get attuned into your world. I think that will definitely help to keep your reader engaged in the long run. So that is it. Those are my 3 tips for starting your novel and not just staring at a blank white page and being super daunted about it. It's not a daunting thing. It should be a fun thing. It's an exploration of a story that you are excited about. So have some fun in doing it. Get a little loosey-goosey. Remember, this is your rough draft, your first draft. So that is it. Remember to have a great time writing. Writing is supposed to be fun, so try and make it as fun as possible. After all, why else would you be doing it? If you enjoyed this video, give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.